Welcome, everyone. I'm Miranda Larson, Associate Director of Career Services here at Trinity, and we are thrilled that you were able to join us for, or watch recorded later, this special panel about the CORO Fellows Program featuring Trinity alumni. If you are joining us live, please feel free to add any questions into the chat. We'll make sure to address those throughout the panel, and we'll also leave some time at the end for additional questions. On behalf of the Center for Experiential Learning and Career Success, we would like to say thank you to our panelists for sharing their time and expertise with us today. So with that, I will turn it over to Colin to introduce himself.
Thank you for the opportunity. Oops, I need to share the correct screen. All right, take two. Can everyone see my slide deck? Are we looking at the right thing? Okay.
Looks good.
All right, thank you. I'm Colin Dale. I'm the Interim Program Director for the St. Louis CORO Fellows Program. We appreciate the opportunity to share more about the experience today, both live and recording. And we have the privilege to have two Trinity alums who are also alumni of the CORO Fellows Program in St. Louis. So with that, I'll pass it to Allison to introduce yourself.
Hi, it's great to be here. I'm Allison Hawk, and I am a 1988 graduate of Trinity University. And I did the CORO Fellowship immediately following the time that I went through Trinity, and it was a wonderful opportunity. I'm also a parent of a graduate of Trinity, and I am happy to be here. I want to tell you a little bit more about the experience and the connections and the opportunities that it really afforded to me.
Hi, everyone. I'm Catherine Hamaker. I was a 2013 graduate of Trinity in Urban Studies and Political Science, and then went on to participate in the CORO program the year after. So I'm excited to be here today.
And I'm Colin Dale. I'm not a Trinity alum, but I'm a graduate of the St. Louis program in 2017. And I'm going to start by sharing a brief slide deck that overviews the fellowship. After that, we have some questions prepared, and we'd love to hear directly from Allison and Catherine. I think we'll spend the bulk of our time doing that, as well as we wanted to field any questions that students have here live. We want to be sure that we hold space to answer those as well. With that, so to give you an idea, these are three separate folks. One's an elected official. One runs Forward Through Ferguson, which is leading racial equity work in the St. Louis region. And one is a prominent businessman. What do these three people have in common? Well, they all went through the St. Louis CORO Fellows Program here in different years to give you an idea of the diversity of the people who go through it and the diversity of what people do after the program. I thought these three folks would give you some sense of the types of people who go through the program and what they're up to afterwards. So whether it's government, nonprofit, for-profit, there's certainly a lot of value to going through the CORO Fellows program. Briefly, and then we'll add some color to it with Allison and Catherine's perspective. Wanted to run through some of the basics of what the program is, what you can expect as a participant. We'll speak to the finances, we'll speak to life after CORO, and then we will also speak about the application process. So the history of the Fellows Program is really rooted in this question: how do we grow a healthy democracy? The program started in California all the way back in the 1940s. If you can imagine America and the world at that time, certainly it seemed like the experiment of democracy was a bit under threat with the rise of fascism abroad and some of the domestic problems or challenges America was struggling with. Maybe we can relate a little bit to that today in the year 2020. And it occurred to the folks who started the program that there really was no way to train public officials. So this is before Masters in Public Policy. This is before you could really study to become a public official. And they looked at the medical field and they said, well, if doctors, if say Allison had a passion to become a brain surgeon, it's not like Allison would spend her time in medical school solely learning about the brain in isolation. She would learn about the entire system that is a body. She would spend months on different floors of a hospital or in different healthcare settings to better understand the healthcare system before she would ever think to go specialize in one part of the body. So we think about kind of the space of public affairs or governing. The same approach is true, that you can't approach a sector or an organization in isolation. You really need to understand how the whole system functions, especially if you want to drive change at a systems level. We're here today to represent the St. Louis program, although it is important to note that we work very closely with four other centers who also offer the CORO Fellows program, and it exists in San Francisco, New York City, Pittsburgh, and Los Angeles. We can certainly speak most closely to the St. Louis experience, and I'm happy to connect anyone who's interested in these other cities, as well as when you visit the website corofellowship.org, you can learn more about the differences and the pros and cons to each of the programs in each of the 5 cities. So the methodology, the CORO Fellows program is not grad school and it's not a career. It's something in between. It's not academic. So, you may learn about a problem through a case study in a class. Well, in CORO, you're going to experience a case study in real time, in real life. So it relies heavily on experiential learning. Another major component is that you're part of a cohort. So myself, Allison, and Catherine are all in separate cohorts of 12 or 16 people. But you learn how to self-govern as a group. You also learn how to make decisions as a group. And also your cohort experiences things simultaneously. And you learn a lot when people from different backgrounds are going through the same experience as you and how you're interpreting what's happening, what you see as important. It really furthers your ability to understand and recognize biases, both in yourself and others. And it also helps you to translate. So the core methodology, you actually spend, as I'll go into on the next slide, you spend time working in different sectors. And so you learn how people talk about issues using different words. And sometimes it feels like a different language. They understand problems from a different perspective. And if we want to drive change, especially systems level change, we know that we have to be able to translate and communicate with people of different backgrounds who see problems differently, who talk about problems differently. Allison and Catherine, if you all want to jump in and add anything as I'm going, please do. A core component are what we call field placements. And so there are 5 of them, and you'll spend around 4 weeks in each of these placements. So you'll spend time in a local government, you'll spend time with a business or a for-profit organization, with a labor union, in electoral politics, and with a nonprofit. So you get a sense, you get real experience, you get a number of at-bats, I should say, of how to start a job, how to close out a job, and you get a real experience about how the nonprofit sector functions versus the government sector versus the business sector, et cetera. And in each of these placements, you complete a high stakes, basically consulting project. So you come in, you're there for 4 weeks to accomplish a project, but also to learn about that organization, to learn about that sector. And so while I'm going through a nonprofit placement, my 11 other fellows in my cohort are also in a nonprofit placement simultaneously. And so through that, we can do some cross-learning. And then also through our seminar space, which will be on the next slide, we do a number of informational interviews. So not only do you have a chance to work for a nonprofit, you have a chance to interview basically everyone who's anyone in that nonprofit sector, same for the business sector, same for the government sector, et cetera. So you have a pretty comprehensive understanding of what's going on in that sector and who's leading it. Seminar space is similar to like class space or lecture space, except again, it's experiential. And as the slide says, you build a number of skills and have a chance to practice a number of skills aligned to the CORO methodology. When this happens, so on a typical week in CORO, you spend 4 days a week at your field placement. So you spend 4 days working full-time with an organization. And then on Tuesday night and all day Friday, you spend in seminar, doing those informational interviews, debriefing your experience, solving problems with your cohort, doing some cross-learning, and being introduced to the skills and methodology. In between field placements are kind of buffered by focus weeks, and those revolve around a topic of concern in the region. So in the past, examples have been a week to study media in St. Louis, or a week to study agriculture in the St. Louis region, which you can see here. So these kind of cross-cutting issues that are important to be exposed to and to know about buffer the field placements. Jumping into finances and support, it is similar to grad school in that, or the CORO Fellowship is similar to grad school in that it is investment of your time. It's a 9-month program, it's full time. One of the ways it differs from grad school is that there's no tuition. So while you are investing your time and earning potential, you're not going to take out more loans to pay for the program. We also offer need-based living stipends. Traditionally, those have varied between $500 and $1,500 a month. I will say one benefit, there's many benefits to being in St. Louis. One of them is a relatively cheap cost of living, especially compared to the other 4 centers. And so $1,500 a month is legitimately enough to live off of. And then for certain lenders, especially any federal student loans you may have, the fellowship does offer student loan deferment over the course of your year. And similar to grad school, it is an investment in your future, right? So you're not jumping right into a career and earning a salary from day one. As Catherine and Allison, they may describe it slightly different, but I often hear alums talk about CORO and that you get a career's worth of experience and a career's worth of network kind of crammed into 1 year. Oftentimes we talk about the skill set, the experience, and the network is what you're going to get out of CORO. And so while you learn a tremendous amount in 9 months, it is an investment in your future. So after CORO, folks go on to do a wide variety of things, as we'll talk about here with 2 examples, Allison and Catherine, and we also shared at the top of the slide deck. In St. Louis, there's over 500 alumni who have gone through the program. Around the country, there's around 10,000 alumni who've gone through CORO programs all around the country, mostly clustered in those 5 cities where the program's offered, and also Washington, D.C. Another thing to consider is we have a variety of university partnerships in just about every sector. So some of the ones listed here are social work and public health, business school, public policy school. Our website has that full list. Excuse me. One thing that, and maybe Catherine or Allison will speak to it, but one thing folks often leave with at the end of the program is a clarity on what they want to do next. So you get exposed to so many different experiences, so many different types of organizations, and so many different sectors. Gives you a lot of opportunities to discover about yourself and what you want to do, and grad school may be the next step for you. As of tomorrow, I need to update this slide because we've officially extended the application deadline. This says January 6th. Tomorrow, all of our websites will be updated to say January 15th, which is a Friday. So the application is due in about a month from today, which is December 17th. You can learn more about the application online. I'm also happy to answer questions here. It's pretty straightforward. You'll need a resume. You'll need 2 letters of recommendation, which are the first things to probably address because they take the longest. There's 3 essay questions, which are pretty straightforward, really trying to get a sense of who you are and what you care about. And then we need, it can be unofficial, but we need your university transcript. And there's the national website, corofellowship.org, which I will also put into the chat, along with our corostl.org website. And here is a brief quote. With that, is there anyone in the audience who has any live questions? And then I do want to jump into a brief panel here with Catherine and Allison. And I can stop sharing my screen. Hopefully I did a decent job of capturing the program.
You did a great job. I always say it's like 25 years of experience in 9 months.
And Colin, I'm sorry, this is Jacob. I just want to make sure, because I've got another student that I'm kind of trying to ping in and tweeting some stuff to him or messaging some stuff to him. Did I understand that there's no cost to the program and that there is the potential for housing assistance? I just want to make sure I heard that right.
That's correct. There's no tuition, and it's need-based. Yeah. And for some perspective, $500 to $1,500 a month.
Okay. Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That's a good question.
So I went into the program after I finished a political science and philosophy major and a history minor at Trinity, thinking I wanted to get a master's in public administration and a law degree. And I spent 1 week in the mayor's office in Granite City, Illinois, a dying steel town on the east side. And I determined that that was not what I wanted to do. I had deferred graduate programs at that time. And it turned out to be, if that was the only thing that I learned, and there were many things else that I learned, it was a great opportunity for me to clarify what it was that I did not want to do, what I thought I wanted to do, and what inspired me in terms of an atmosphere, and being able to plug in my true skills, my true interest in that area, but just in a very different kind of way. So I, to this day, use the skills that I gained in CORO and the insights that I gained in CORO in the work that I do, and I have for the last number of years since I graduated. So it was a program that helped me take 25 years of experience, cram it into 9 months, and get professional polish around every corner, and create relationships and bridges that I still cross today.
And Allison, do you mind taking a step back and thinking back to before, when you were applying for the program, kind of, or thinking about applying for the program, what initially attracted you to the CORO Fellowship?
I liked the idea that I was going to get experience in a lot of different sectors, and that I was going to have the opportunity to work and only be a few weeks away from my next assignment. So I would have substantive work experience in different sectors. And I liked the idea of going back to my area of the country, the Midwest. I grew up in Kansas City, and I wanted to be back there. So I applied to the St. Louis Center and found that it was a great opportunity for me.
And Catherine, I'll ask you the same question. If you can think back, what initially attracted you to the CORO Fellows Program?
Yeah, so I was urban studies and political science at Trinity, and urban issues and policy was my concentration. And so I was really interested in figuring out how to get sort of policy experience without getting a graduate degree in it, because I just wasn't super sure. And so CORO was an opportunity to, like Allison said, try out a bunch of things. And, you know, some of my placements, like, you know, it's funny, I feel like I have a story for almost anything, because I spent like 6 weeks working at the largest lead mining company in the Northern Hemisphere. Like, just kind of random, but I learned a lot about like environmental policy and thinking about how to navigate tricky issues like that. And I had a placement at the Missouri Department of Mental Health. I didn't know anything about mental health, but I learned a lot about how public affairs and policy play a role in that system. And so I feel like I got exposure to a lot of things I didn't know anything about, and all sort of had that tie to public affairs and systems level thinking. And so it really clarified sort of the intersection of all of those things for me.
Thank you. And I will say alumni tend to rave about the program. It's not just Allison, Catherine, and me here today. One recently surveyed, 98% of alumni said they'd strongly recommend the program. And I think 99% said they use their experience and tools on a daily basis in their career. I have a question in the chat here. I think it's a good time to ask it. What kinds of things did you all consider when choosing a location?
So I was concerned about the cost of living. So when I left Trinity, I had worked as a nanny while I was at Trinity for a family in San Antonio. And so I had a little bit of money saved up, enough that I knew that I could kind of get by, but not enough to be able to live in San Francisco. And so I applied. You apply nationally and then you rank the cities. And I had put St. Louis and Pittsburgh as kind of the only two cities I thought I could make it work in. Because I wasn't sure that I would qualify for the stipend, and I just, you know, it seemed like those were the reasonable cities for me. And lots of folks that do the program in other cities speak highly of it as well. And, you know, lots of folks that applied in California ended up in the program with me in St. Louis, and then went on to have careers in St. Louis. So I can't necessarily say that there's a right or a wrong on that front. I know we're all kind of partial to the St. Louis Center, but, you know, there's a lot of shared experience across the country in the program.
For me, it was definitely cost of living and a sort of a familiarity, but cost of living really trumped it all. I hate to use that word these days, but I look back though, and I think, wow, what if I would have done it in San Francisco? I would have just had a very different path and trajectory, and I wouldn't have had the opportunities, but I would have had different opportunities. So I think every center offers a great opportunity, and the national selection process offers some ability, although obviously we're partial to St. Louis, that's true, the opportunity to go to other cities and communities. I think the year after you graduate, and even sometimes we have people who've graduated many years before, and those are wonderful additions to the program as well. So that's something to keep in mind. But the program, having the opportunity to do the program right after you graduate, you have many opportunities in your life to do something very, very different. And depending on where you've grown up, taking the opportunity after college to go to a very different region of the country, whether it's St. Louis or whether it's any of the other centers, is really a great opportunity. There's a book that I know that my son, who is a Trinity grad, got from one of a recommendation from someone at Trinity, and it was The Defining Decade, Making the Most of Your 20s. And it was really trying experiences, really trying on a lot of hats. And to me, CORO is sort of the quintessential experiential opportunity. And it's really it can't be beat in terms of the experience. But the thing that I also will say is it gives you connections. But I think first and foremost, the thing that it gave me that I didn't have when I finished Trinity was really the confidence to call anyone, to do anything, to solve any problem, and to jump into any situation. It made me the quickest study on everything that I have done for the last 30 years. And I owe that all to CORO.
I'm glad you mentioned confidence, Allison. I do want to ask you what's your top highlight from your experience, but also will share a little bit how I ended up, or what I think the difference is in St. Louis. So I did the program 2 years after undergrad. And so I didn't come directly after graduation. So I will validate it was still very much attractive and useful as a young professional. I think what differentiates St. Louis, one, Allison touched on it, especially if you're not from the Midwest, it's a chance to live for a defined period of time, 1 year, to try something new on. Also, St. Louis cost of living that's been touched on. I would say the access that St. Louis CORO Fellows get is different than in the other regions. One, St. Louis it's smaller than New York City. So like when I worked for the office of the mayor of the city of St. Louis, we got to go out to lunch with the mayor the first day and last day of our placement. You're probably not going to go to lunch with Bill de Blasio on your first day of replacement, right? But also the CORO Fellows program from the beginning, it was brought in by a very prominent family, the Danforth family in St. Louis. And so it's enjoyed this level of proximity and reputation. Now with that, I would love to move on to a few more questions about your background, Allison and Catherine. Would you mind sharing what was a top highlight from your experience, Catherine?
Yeah, so the mining company experience is definitely up there. Just like when I imagine myself like going hundreds of feet under the earth into a lead mine for a day to learn about, what is life like for people that work there and how do they think of these companies. And that is really, I think about it often because it's just an experience I would not have had otherwise. I didn't spend a lot of time in rural areas growing up. And so I didn't have a lot of experience, like honestly, outside of movies, related to like the kinds of people that work in mines and what it means for generations of families and how that relates to environmental policy and all of that. And so that is a big highlight. I also spent a day working at a yogurt farm in like central Illinois. It was part of one of those focus weeks where we talked about agriculture for the week. And so again, like it just that whole experience of having a whole day to spend with a family on a family-owned farm, to think about, how does this place and this farm fit into the whole system of agriculture and the food system and its proximity to the St. Louis metropolitan area. And just having experiences like that, that despite proximity to, where I had grown up, I had just never had, I think is a highlight. And the fact that you go through it with a cohort is really, we had a Zoom reunion with my cohort a couple of weeks ago. And 12 of the 16 of us, even though it's been 7 years, got on the call. And it's just like, it's really fun to reminisce because we all went through this really unique experience together.
So I think that my answer to that would be there's so many highlights. It's really difficult. So I think about it in a couple of ways, and I'm going to bridge on that, the comment about a cohort. My cohort, like every cohort, we all have different, sort of backgrounds, and it's intentionally put together so we have an opportunity to be in some places that are maybe outside of our comfort zone. Coming from Trinity University, I had not had as much experience with diverse populations, although at the time it was perhaps more diverse than my high school in Kansas City. But coming to St. Louis to do the CORO Fellowship Program, I count as such an opportunity for me to sit at the table with people who look very different than me, particularly those of color, African American, who still to this day are people that I credit with helping me to understand what it was like to live in their footsteps, what it was like to be them, what it was like to have that opportunity to be in a situation to hear about other people's lived experiences. So the cohort, I believe, was truly a highlight, and it's informed my personal life. It's informed my work life, and it's been it's a very rich thing to think back on and also to draw on even now. So while we don't have 12 that are together on a regular basis, I have a handful who really are, and it's amazing how small the world is here in St. Louis. So I get the opportunity to do all kinds of interesting projects in the civic space. And recently I was working with one of my clients and showed up at a meeting where one of my fellow class members, her husband was representing someone on the other side. And it's a very high profile case in St. Louis and nationally. And it was just really interesting to boil that down to, there was a CORO connection in there, both with the judge and both with the other attorney. So that happens a lot, which I think is a really great and comforting thing. So you can really create a connection and a network very quickly. I spent 9 months, it was professional polish. Every week or two, I would look up somebody who'd gone through the fellows program. I'd call them up and I would say, hey, can I come and see you and find out what you do? Genuinely, spirit of curiosity, just interested. There are people that I still am in contact with. Ellen Alper is one of those people. I picked up the directory for the two of you who are on from CORO, and we struck it up back then. She was at the realtor board and I wanted to know what she did. And so those experiences and being able to make those connections that I still have, I ended up going into the work that I went into. My career has been, after CORO, I went to work for a CORO fellow at a large public relations firm called Fleischman Hillard in St. Louis. And I had the opportunity to work on a large business client account, which helped to redevelop a number of places in downtown, including getting a stadium, getting a football team for St. Louis and those things. I was working for a former CORO fellow that I had during the course of the time just called up and asked him to talk about what he did. And so I had the opportunity of a lifetime because I had reached out during CORO, not during an assignment, but during an opportunity that I had just to ask somebody what they did. So that opportunity to just, it's intense. That's the thing about it. It's 24/7. Every day is different. The variety is amazing, and you'll never have the same day twice. You'll never be in the Groundhog Day space. Even I bet in the online world, you'll be okay. So those are the highlights.
There's a lot to pull out there. Certainly it's common for graduates to go on to work for other alums or, where they had a placement, right? Allison talked about professional polish. The CORO Fellow space is a really perfect space to be as a young professional because you get the chance to do like meaningful, consequential work and you are personally at stake, but you're also in the space as a learner. And so when you inevitably make mistakes, small or larger, people know that you're a fellow and you're there to learn. You get a ton of feedback from your cohort and your trainer and in your space to grow. And that type of experience is just so invaluable because in the real world, you may be messing up and you're not going to get any feedback until it's too late, right? Allison touched on this a little bit, Catherine. I'm curious to hear if you could reflect kind of on your responsibilities or what you're up to professionally, and if you could connect the dots to skill sets or networks or experiences that you had as a fellow that translate into your day-to-day work.
Yeah, so I'm an urban planner. I work at a large planning and architecture firm. And every day I go out into the community and talk to residents and business owners and city councils and mayors. And I do a lot of writing. I do a lot of long-term strategic planning, and all of those things are things I feel like I got to perfect while I was a fellow. So presenting on something that you maybe don't know that a ton about, but you're thrown in there and you got to figure it out and, make connections with the folks you're presenting to is something I had to do all the time in CORO. It was like here's your placement. You have one day to learn about what they do here at this office, and then you're going to go out and be the representative of this place in the community. Or, you know, here's a candidate you met yesterday. Now you're on the canvassing team. Proceed. And so figuring out on the ground kind of how to navigate a situation and then be able to go write about it or present about it or talk to someone about it is certainly something I had to perfect when I was a fellow and do every day at work. I also think figuring out how to connect with people you don't naturally have a ton in common with is something you have to practice a lot as a fellow, whether it's connecting to people in your cohort that came from somewhere else and don't have a similar background, or working with coworkers at one of your placements, or a director, one of your supervisors, or as I mentioned, like people you meet out in the community. You interact with, I mean, I wish we could count thousands of people probably as a fellow. And so finding ways to connect with all of those people so that you can learn from their experience and take something away is something I have to do every day in my job. So it's helpful to practice that over the course of 9 months. And as Colin said, while the stakes are high in the sense that you are doing useful, productive work for the placements when you are there, you're also a fellow, and so you're there to learn, and they're there to help you learn. And so it really is a reciprocal relationship. They know that they're getting a product and getting something out of you being an employee for a few weeks, but they're also really at stake to make sure that you learn something about their organization and how it works there. So I think that's a big takeaway from CORO that I use every day.
Catherine was alluding to a good point in that the CORO Fellowship, like life, it is what you make it, right? It is an experiential program. To a certain extent, your learning is defined by what you advocate for, what you say you want to learn about. In other words, what kind of your weaknesses are or areas of growth that you can lean into and really get a chance to practice in a safe space. And then also to a certain extent defined by what the St. Louis region needs, right? So we have really bright young people moving into the region wanting to do important work, and certainly St. Louis can benefit from that on an annual basis. And in a place like St. Louis, there's lots of opportunities to plug into consequential work. Now, as thinking about your experience and other people in your cohort or people you've seen come after you, what traits would you say make a good CORO fellow? Or if you were a Trinity student considering, is this really something that is for me, what would you say to them about kind of what they would need to be interested in, what their skill set might be, or any attributes or traits they would have?
I would say that someone who is open to new possibilities and is interested in lifelong learning and is ready to jump in and give it their all on experiences, who likes experiential education, is the right person. So it's basically taking an opportunity to go on a journey that you don't know what the destination is, and being really open to what that looks like. So there have been people who've gone through CORO who were going to medical school, and they did go to medical school. There are people who thought they wanted to do law school and decided not to. There are people who decided to go to law school because they were at ACLU. So it's really the person who's got that spirit of openness. And I think Trinity students are perfect for it because they are exposed to a lot of different sectors, a lot of different people, a lot of different experiences at Trinity. And through one of the professors that I had at Trinity, she actually encouraged me to apply to the program because her husband was a tenured professor at Berkeley. And so she knew about it because of a California connection to the program. So I think just someone who's really interested. I mean, to me, I know I say it, but it's really a no-brainer. You know, you don't have to be deciding exactly what you want to do. It's like you have to interview for all these jobs and you get into a job and then maybe you don't even like it. These jobs, you're going to end up, it's great. On a Sunday night, you'll find out where you're going to be on Monday, and you're like not supposed to Google it. You're supposed to just go in cold and fresh. And while maybe that doesn't happen quite like it did back in the day when we had no internet, right? It is absolutely an opportunity for a kind of growth that you really can't duplicate in your life. And I will also add that CORO is part of my thinking and my framework every single day, because I went on to work in the NFL, and after that I started my own business in marketing communications with a very public affairs, nonprofit lens look and in a very niche space. And I have my CORO tools in my toolkit every day when I think about sectors, when I think about problems that we're dealing with in our community, and I think about who needs to be at the table. And I think about that in my mind. I go through that checklist, and sometimes you'll see me in a meeting go, do we have someone from business? Do we have someone from government, media, political, labor, community? Do we have all those people? And I use it all the time.
Anything you would add, Catherine, folks what they should be thinking about if they're considering the program?
Yeah, I always feel silly because I really think that if we had CORO trained people in all careers, the world would just function in a better way, because the tools and the skills that you learn throughout the experience apply to whatever kind of interests you have. You know, when I was at Trinity, I took an urban education class, and I thought I was really interested in figuring out how to fix urban education and education policy. And so that's something I really thought. And then I got into CORO and I realized that this sort of cross-sector collaboration and figuring out how the communication channels work and these siloed departments, and that all works in education or healthcare or the legal community, or, you know, whatever the interest area is, the systems all work the same. And so I think regardless of the interest or the particular topic, you know, in my class, there were people that were really interested in one particular topic. But I think when you enter CORO and you realize that like these systems all interact and they all work within this much bigger system, the interest becomes less important, and the sort of how to navigate it and how to develop the skills and the experience and the confidence to get out there and figuring it out after CORO, I think is more important. So it's hard for me to necessarily like narrow down which majors or which interests lend themselves to CORO. But coming from political science and urban studies at Trinity, I did think it was a natural connection.
I studied public health and Spanish, so different, and we ended up in the same place. There's a question in the chat here that I want to get to. It says, well, actually we have two now in the chat. How do we determine financial stipends? Is it possible to work part-time jobs to cover additional finances? Stipends, as I mentioned, are need-based. We are operating from a commitment that we want this program to be financially accessible to anyone who's qualified and wants to participate. So we're committed to making sure finances are not a barrier. Now, if you come from a family who, you know, may be wealthy and able to support you, we certainly want to prioritize someone who's in a different position first, right? So I know that that's not a super specific answer, but I'm happy to follow up one-on-one to talk more about what it would look like for you. And then we have another question: what's the best way to make sure that my application is competitive? I'm very interested in the program. I'll share a little bit, and Allison and Catherine, if you have ideas too. There is no kind of right answer to make your application competitive. We do ask for 2 letters of rec. I would pick 2 people who, 1, are advocates of yours, and 2, can speak to your capacity for impact or capacity for high quality work. If that happens to be in an academic space, great. If that happens to be in professional space, great. You don't need 1 from a professor, 1 from a job, something like that. And in terms of how to make your essays competitive, certainly would want to have multiple people put eyes on them and review them to make sure they're high quality writing. In terms of the content, I would encourage you to incorporate storytelling, but to really tell your narrative, who you are, what you care about, what you hope to get out of the program. The more authentic you can be to yourself, the better chance that someone who doesn't know you reading your application will get a sense for who you are and what you're about. And so I know that's kind of generic advice on how to have a quality application, but that's what I tell people who ask. Allison or Catherine, if you can remember applying to the program, is there anything that you think would be helpful to think about in terms of putting together an application?
Yeah, I've read a lot of applications over the years. When we get the pool of people interested in being CORO Fellows, and to me, the letters of recommendation are the ones that stand out the most to me. The people that have, you know, from reading the letter, you can tell that you actually have a connection to this professor, or the person is able to tell a story about a time that you did something notable or above and beyond or something like that. I'm always impressed when the letters of recommendation are memorable, I would say. The other thing I just want to note about that other question, in terms of working part-time, it's not super feasible to work part-time when you're a CORO fellow just because of your time. You're working full-time as a fellow. And so a lot of fellows in my class did things like dog sitting on the weekends, or, you know, some babysitting occasionally I did, just kind of to make some extra money. But I will say that the stipend program is much more robust nowadays than it was when I was a fellow. So just something to note.
That's a good point on the part-time job. Yeah, if you want to really hustle and you want to be working 7 days a week, sure. But this is definitely an all-day Monday through Friday commitment, some weekend commitments. So it'd be really tricky to keep a regular job.
Mm-hmm.
I did some project-based work. I certainly did my fair share of dog sitting and kind of as it came up opportunities, and maybe on the holiday breaks, things like that. Allison, anything? I know you actually teach a class at Trinity. Maybe you can help explain what it's like when students ask for letters of rec, or what makes it easy for a professor to say yes to something like that.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. So you want to pick someone who really does know you and can tell some stories, but you want to help them help you. So I recommend that you help them by giving them some specific points. I know that sometimes when you're an undergrad and you think it's impure to help someone with some of the words that they're going to use. But I always assure people that if they give me something and I want to polish it up or embellish it or add something or subtract something, it helps me to get them the kind of recommendation that they would want to have and they would be proud of. So don't feel as though you can't ask for the order and say, hey, here's what I'm trying to emphasize in this application. And would you think about this? I have a senior in college right now, and having to encourage her that it's important to reach out on a timely basis, and it's important to give somebody a little bit something to say once you know who you're going to get to recommend you. So please don't be bashful about that. It helps the professor to do that, or any recommender. I've done recommendations for people, you know, throughout my career. So please help the person help you.
And I would say, generally speaking, people are very happy to write them if you're a relationship with them. Like, it's kind of an honor to get to write one, as long as you have a couple weeks to do it, you know, and you have a resume and some background information, as Allison shared, so you're not starting from scratch.
And then the other piece of advice that I have for you is make sure that you let your recommender know how it goes. And that goes for your whole life. It's like when you have someone who's your reference or your recommender, keeping in contact with them and letting them know how it went and how appreciative you were that they put in a good word for you, but then also letting them know what the results were really great. People want to hear from you. And I know I tell my kids this all the time. I'm like, they want to hear from you. They want to know what's going on. Just check in with them. They're happy to help you. If they can help you in any way, they will do that. So don't be shy.
Well, does anyone else in the audience have questions for Catherine, Allison, myself? I can also, I imagine over email, some of our contact information will be shared. My contact information is definitely on our website, and I can post that again here in the chat. Those are the questions that I have here. Catherine or Allison, anything else that you want to be sure to share about your experience or the CORO Fellowship, or any other questions you have for each other or me?
I have something that I would like to share. One is just really to let you guys know that for me, the program was a game changer. For me, the program was how my life trajectory was formed. It was something that I never could have imagined, but I went to a Montessori preschool when I was a little kid, and that sort of experiential education just sort of stuck with me, and that's the way I always learned best. So the opportunity that I had, depending on your learning style, and you have to assess what that is, I think the experiences were amazing and the connections were amazing, but that level of confidence will inoculate you for a lifetime in your career and your experiences. And I do mean it when I say I still draw upon the experiences that I had in CORO, and my network is still very strong today, and I can keep going back over those bridges. So I encourage the program to anyone who thinks that it sounds like a great opportunity, because it really is. And we we've never had a time in our country, in our generation or our lifetime, where we have needed more qualified people who are thoughtful about all the sectors, because that's the only way we're going to solve a lot of the problems that we have in this country.
Yeah, I would say, you know, the reason I was drawn to Trinity originally was because of the small class sizes and having those relationships with my professors and really feeling it like Trinity was a community, especially compared to a lot of larger schools. And so I think the connections and the way that I was able to learn at Trinity is really akin to the experiences I had in CORO, and figuring out how to learn from. At Trinity, it was classmates. In CORO, maybe it's coworkers or cohort members, but figuring out how to put myself in places where I would get those experiences is something that CORO allowed me to continue to do. And so I think taking classes at Trinity that got me out of the classroom and got me having discussions with classmates is what I wanted to keep doing. And when I went to graduate school, I didn't necessarily see those things happening. And so I applied for graduate school and CORO right out of Trinity, thinking like, well, let's just see how it shakes out. And then when I was accepted to CORO, I was able to really keep going on that path. And so I think if that is a reason that Trinity really works for you all as students, having those experiences that aren't just, sit in a large lecture hall and listen to a professor, then CORO is a good continuation of that, because it's a lot of the experiential, really making your own learning out of a group and with the expertise of some smart people. So I think in that case, it was a natural kind of next step after Trinity.
Well, thank you, Miranda. We really appreciate the time to share about the program. I haven't seen any more questions come through in the chat, so I guess last call for those. But otherwise, we're really grateful for the time and opportunity to share about the program.
There we go. Thank you so much, guys. I did want to add a couple of plugs for us right quick for those that are watching the recording later or the live students. So the Center for Experiential Learning and Career Success, where we are based out of, called Celsius, we can be a great resource for you too as you're putting together your application. I think we have a lot to offer just in terms of what we've kind of given what we've seen before in terms of these types of applications. And it sounds like Professor Rowe in the Writing Center has also offered to help with post-grad essays like this. So once again, thank you, Colin, Allison, and Catherine for your time today. This is awesome information, and we're looking forward to getting the word out and hopefully getting you some applications.